Super excited to have everyone here today. We are pre-recording this. It is Friday, June 11th. And the reason I bring that up is because this space grows and goes so fast that even when this airs on Tuesday, who knows what the heck will happen. So I wanted to thank all of our guests for joining us today. So I'll be moderating the panel. So my name is Behnke. We'll knock some quick intros out of the way. So Behnke, I'm the CEO and co-founder over at Halborn. Halborn, we are a cybersecurity advisory firm for leading blockchain projects. And that's a little bit about myself. There we go. Let's go. We'll start with Peter. Let's get a quick little intro, Peter.
Sure. My name is Peter Kacherginsky. I'm a blockchain security engineer at Coinbase. And I'm also the editor of the Blockchain Threat Intelligence newsletter, if you're a subscriber.
Will.
Hey, how's it going? Will Shahda, founder of APY.Finance. Our platform is a yield aggregator. Our big value prop is really heavy diversification in the yield farming space. We think it's a pretty critical thing to reduce the risk for the returns that you're getting in yield farming, because the risks can be very obscure. And as we've seen recently, can be pretty high if you have all your eggs in one basket. But I'm sure we'll get into that.
Nice. And then Steve.
Yeah, I'm Steve, Rob's partner at Halborn, the cybersecurity firm. Also the author and instructor for a blockchain and smart contract security and hacking course. It's called SEC 554. And I'm the CISO at Halborn, been in the space, traditional corporate security for about 20 years, and always been obsessed with blockchain and Bitcoin since the early days. And now I'm merging the security and the decentralized and blockchain space here together. So happy to talk to everybody right now on the panel.
Awesome. All right. Well, what I want to do is so we have 30 minutes to talk about all sorts of things in this space. We're going to have, whoever's watching this, I would imagine you're going to have plenty of builders in the space, plenty of people that are professionally in the space, but also lots of consumers, a lot of users of DeFi, Lego blocks, instruments, all the above. So what I want to do is start with consumers. All right. So if you are a general user of the quote DeFi ecosystem, what are some of the top things that sort of a noob or someone coming into the space should be aware of? What are the kind of the top things that you would suggest? You know, if your brother or your cousin was like, hey, I want to start adding liquidity to Uniswap, I hear that's something that I should do. What are the things that you would tell them to be aware of and look out for?
I can start really quick. I think that security awareness of all of this is probably the largest risk, because right now it's kind of like a wild, wild west right now, where you don't really know exactly what you're getting into sometimes, because there's tons of scammers or like copycat contracts. There's a lot of times where if you want to invest, like let's say in a certain like token or a new platform, there are scammers out there that will find what the name is, copy it, deploy a contract to like Uniswap or a liquidity pool to Uniswap or any of these other platforms, because anybody can do that. You can, there's no barriers. It's decentralized. An anonymous person can put up there and trick you into investing in it, thinking you're part of some like early round, and you join into a Telegram group with like thousands of other people that also are trying to get tricked and like make you think that you're putting into the real thing. And yeah, really, it's a fake one. So the thing is, do your research to make sure that the community that you're in or you're participating is actually the authentic one. Look at the protocol you're investing in. Make sure that the contract address matches the one that's like listed on their real site, and you're not on a scam site. Really, just always be very, very cognizant and aware of what you're doing. And don't mistrust everything. Trust but verify, but always think like, okay, is this a real thing? Don't pull the trigger so fast.
Yeah, that when before our token went liquid, there was a ton of instances of people making fake versions of it spinning up a pool on Uniswap and then blasting that out on Telegram groups. And repeatedly, we would have people come into our group being like, did I just get scammed? Like, what's going on here? Is this your actual token? And we're like, no. Right. So we had to throw, and if you're a new project, like throw up warnings all over the place, being like, do not trust unofficial sources. Like, make sure you have links to all the official places where, you know, you're providing liquidity for the token, because that happens all the time. Also, the fake airdrops, people will say that like, oh, this is the airdrop for whatever token, and, you know, send ETH here, and, you know, you're screwed. But if someone new to crypto was coming in and asked me like, hey, right, where do I start? Like, I hear providing liquidity on Uniswap is cool. First, I would ask them, how much time do you have? And if they were like, oh, I got like 20 minutes, like right now, I would be like, okay, buy Bitcoin and then forget about this. But if they're like, it's been a pandemic, I don't have shit going on, I have hours a day, then I would start telling them the basics of like, okay, here just are the general like areas of DeFi, the AMMs, right, derivatives, lending markets. But then, you know, for most people doing their own research, like they're not really gonna know, right? If something sounds technical, they're gonna assume that it's good, right? The best thing I could tell them is like, if you're starting out, just only stick to things that have been around for a long time, right? And use that as the proxy, because if they're jumping into something that's a month old, they're not really gonna be savvy enough to do their own research.
Well, do you want to say impermanent loss?
Yeah. So it's like just stick to stuff that's been around for a while, and, you know, stick to things that have that Lindy effect protection, and that would be the best thing I'd offer.
I guess to Will's point, if it takes more than 20 minutes to explain something, what we're dealing with here is very high complexity. If we have new users who are onboarding and they're just getting overwhelmed, like, okay, I need to install MetaMask, and I need to back up my seed keys, and a couple hours later they want to do their first trade, their first swap, then it's a lot easier to trick those users into a malicious token, into a malicious website. Even to be honest, like just a few minutes before this chat began, I got an email saying that I need to update my compound tokens to a new release. And it's kind of bizarre how they got my email in the first place. But look, I'm looking at scams all the time. And for a moment there, I still triggered this, like, do I really need to go, and how we had to do the DAI updates back in the day? Do I really need to do this? And I've been looking at scams day in, day out. So the bar for how much we need to increase the usability in the space is unfortunately very high. We need to reach that. And the advice for users is just take your time. Don't rush into things. It is a complex field. It is not perfect or smooth onboarding yet. So we need to take more time to instruct them and handhold them a little bit.
Yeah, you know, talking about onboarding, right? The like sort of official sources of things don't look substantially different from the scam versions, because it's still such like an early space. So you don't have these like really like official legitimate things. Oftentimes it's just like, you know, there's a guy in Discord and for a project, and he's like, hey guys, like you should upgrade the token or whatever.
Yeah, really good looking sites that are just almost clones of like the original sites that you think is, oh, this looks legitimate. It's like a React front end. It's kind of like fancy looking, and put it in there, but it's just, yeah, they just, you know, copy the HTML, made their own site, and, you know, with their address that they want you to invest in. So it's really back to like traditional phishing type emails, except on a whole new level. And it just comes down to awareness, you know, just really, like you said, take your time. I think that's a really good thing. And then for the investing part, Will, you're kind of, I think it's called LP and chill, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's our thing.
So I will say that, again, who's watching this is going to be some people that are new to the space. I know that there's going to be a ton of builders in the space. So I just want to dive. We have 30 minutes for this talk. The next 20 minutes, I want to dive into the real deal stuff at this point that builders are dealing with day in and day out, as I know all of us are doing. Peter has an absolutely fantastic, one of my favorite, what do we call it? Basically weekly newsletters called Block Threat. I highly recommend anyone that's interested, go to blockthreat.substack.com. He didn't ask me to say that. I'm just saying it because I like it. I want to start by basically just being like, because every single day, every week at Halborn, all we do is hear about new things that are constantly happening. We have all right, here's the things to look out for. And oh, this week, okay, great. This new thing is happening. So I want to start with Peter. Peter, what are some of the newer trends that are even like super cutting edge that even some of us that are building might not even be aware of? Let's start there.
Sure. I mean, if you've been reading the newsletter or reading any kind of news, like what's happening on the BSC chain with all the pancake swap clones is pretty bad. These are now, it sounds new, but if you're in this space, it sounds pretty familiar. Flash loan attacks, someone is manipulating the price and then they are minting more than they're supposed to. So this is going to continue. What's exciting to me on one side and scary is like where are the attackers going? Wherever the money is at. So the latest trend are NFTs. So people are going after those. So the MeBits attack was very interesting. They figured out a way how to game the lottery, and they were able to generate a very expensive MeBit. So whatever, I guess the trends are going to follow whatever the latest technology was going to be popular. So from DeFi to NFTs, whatever is going to come next, the attackers are guaranteed to come after it.
So when it comes to the MeBit thing, is that, because I'm unfamiliar with that particular instance, was that even a proper exploit, or were they using the precise mechanics that were built, only they gamed it essentially? Is that what I'm hearing here?
Well, that's, in this space, it's very hard sometimes to say, is this really an exploit? Is this really a hack? So my definition for what is a hack is that if someone does something unexpected and earns more money, there's a monetary component there, than they were expected to, then it's a hack of some sort. It could be an economic arbitrage. It could be assisted with flash loans. You can argue that all of those things are features. If we go back to like traditional security, things like, is buffer overflow really a hack, or are you just exploiting a traditional architecture and doing what it's supposed to do? So I would say anything if something happens which is unexpected and people gain more money than they're supposed to, it's an exploit of some sort.
Yeah, there's no terms and conditions really when you're signing up to like interact with it. And if what's in the contract, if it works, then you can argue to say that the developers intended, like you say, it's a bug, not a feature. But sometimes it's very hard, especially with this, complicated logic can be gamed. And like the flash loans they talk about a lot. I think flash loans have now had the context of being a vulnerability or an attack vector, but it's actually like a conduit to lead to an attack. There's actually uses for flash loans too. And now it has such a stigma to it, I think.
So talking from the perspective of a builder, right? Because you guys spend all day trying to break the stuff we make, and we spend all day trying to make stuff you can't break. And there's not a whole lot of standards for us to follow, right? When you compare, like if you're programming in Solidity and you compare that to something like Python or C++ or whatever, there's so many standards in place, right? To guide how you're developing the code. And those have evolved over many, many years. And when you're looking at Solidity, you basically have a little bit of standards around, hey, NAT spec your functions, and beware of reentrancy. Like that's about it, right? There's very, very loose, very minor amounts of guidelines available. And from there, you get a wide variety of different code with many levels of security, because there isn't these kind of like set standards in place. And you like when you're creating smart contracts to begin with, you're already working with what are some of the most horrendous security properties possible, because all the code is public, right? And it's not just that all the code is public, like, oh, it's an open source, source repository or whatever. It's like you verify it on Etherscan. So it's like literally the code that is in production live is public, right? It's not even like, oh, what commit could it be from the repo? It's like, exactly what is running. And it's completely public. It's for the most part permissionless, right? So anyone can screw with it. Even the stuff that's permissioned, you can have your own fork. You can play around with it, mocking whatever address has the permissions to run these different functions. And then you also have access to unlimited funds. So with like flash loans. So it's like it's in the most challenging environment to try and make something secure. Whereas in like traditional tech, if you make something that's like kind of secure, it's not a huge deal because people won't really know what's running on your servers. It's harder. It's like, black box testing. Like it's really hard to kind of figure out what's going on. And then in like traditional tech, even if you do get into like someone's database, it's like, all right, I got their emails, right? Instead of like, oh, I'm rich now. So like it's the biggest sort of incentive and the most difficult environment to work in. And then also there's just like no standards in place.
Yeah, Will, it kind of relates that coming from the background of the hacker side of traditional tech. I think it's going to get worse until it gets better unless we like have these standards and we learn as a builder to, code better and know what to do to protect, your code and do proper auditing. Traditional tech, like you would have people like black hats come, they would fish, somebody like Sally in HR, finally get a foothold in the network, move laterally and pivot there to finally get to like, the credit card system or the data system. And then you would extract the credit card number, then sell it on the black market for like $5 each. Yay. Okay. Now it's like, all right, I'm going to trick people on this like fake coin I put on Uniswap, wait 10 minutes until $1 million gets put there and pull the rug out, and then they're done. It all happens like within like minutes. Like, cool, I just made a few $1 million and less risk because nobody knows who I am. There's no like footprint. So it's gonna, people are gonna start realizing that, and so we need to be here to protect it. I do want to answer, Rob, the question too about trends that we see. So we're on that. One trend that I see a lot is around like bridges. Bridges to connect and interoperate between something like like Polkadot and Ethereum or Ethereum and Cosmos, and it's happening a lot so that we can do these like cross-chain like swapping, and we see them done good and we see them done bad. So as a builder, if you're working on those things, a lot of the times where the risks are is if you try to do this in like a centralized type system where you have a bridge, could be like maybe a database or something that traditional tech that is left exposed that you can manipulate and change it, modify it. It's very difficult to do decentralized bridges, and kudos to those developers or builders that are solving that challenge. But I think that's one of the trends that we do see here and needs to be considered really and looked at very closely.
So go ahead, Peter.
Sorry, I just wanted to add something real quick.
Please.
To Will's point, there's very little documentation security documentation that we're used to in traditional, let's say, web application security. We have OWASP. We have guidelines after guidelines how to design and build secure systems. But this is fine. Like this, we were in the same place back in 2000s when we just found out about XSS or SQL injection. And everyone's getting hacked left and right. So we'll catch up to that. I'm sure I'm trying to build a project which could address this. This is the open blockchain security project, which for now I'm just documenting all the hacks, and eventually I'll try to create some kind of good criteria which simulates OWASP, and I will hopefully share that soon. But what makes it even more difficult is that designing smart contracts is not like you're designing web applications. Web applications, one, it's to your point, it's private. Like there's some degree of security. By obscurity, you have to attack it with all sorts of payloads. with smart contracts, even if you are not posting source code, you can decompile it and figure out what it does more or less. It feels like you're designing, the analogy I've heard before was you're designing a Mars rover that you can send out to space, and you can talk to it maybe once a day, and it's just going to be doing whatever it is. And if it's insecure, there's oftentimes little that you can do to stop the attack. So we have to adapt to that as well to see how we can make those things more or less autonomous and self-defending. So,
it's also
and then,
like, oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying it's also like loading up that Mars rover with like $100 million and then sending it out and being like, good luck. You know?
Yeah, you can watch it. When it does get messed up, you can watch it all happen on the chain. You're like, oh, nothing to do about this. Just cry.
Or sometimes you can't, you don't. Like the MEV attacks, you're going to get front run and you don't even know what's coming. You can try to monitor, but you're only going to find out by the time you already got arbitraged. So there are all sorts of weird things that are present within smart contract, like this DeFi ecosystem, that traditional security is not yet, it doesn't fully translate. So that will need to be adapted as well.
Yeah. Fully agreed. And, you know, it's something that we see, you know, in crypto Twitter, and then just general users as well, saying, okay, well, you know, Pancake Bunny or one of these other, like, oh, Pancake, that was audited. They had a smart contract audit. So what role does a smart contract audit sort of play? And then also, how does it really apply to all of these additional attack vectors that we're now seeing in the form of economic attacks?
I can touch on this quickly.
Sure,
I
please.
think by the time you're doing the audits, this is way down the pipeline. The security process has to begin just as you're on a paper napkin designing the system in the first place. You need to sit down with someone who can create you can go all the way and do like a in-depth threat model and think like how all the different components are interacting, and then put on a black hat and say like, okay, how's this going to get attacked? How's that going to get attacked? Whatever you do, you need to start early on. So if by the time you're getting to something like audits, or you're getting to, let's say, you buying bug bounty programs, you hopefully created a security program. You have people who are on call. You know what to do when you get that message from Sam, you up. So I hope you have a plan on what you're gonna do there. So
yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Peter. You know, it's kind of like the DevOps process of like, you know, shifting left in security, making sure it's you're putting security practices as early on as you possibly can to take care of all the issues that may come out later on. The role of the smart contract audit, you know, kind of from a developer can sometimes play two parts, and we've seen one part where it's truly attacking and finding and getting all the vulnerabilities remediated. And that's where the developers really want the audit to be complete. They understand sometimes it's complex and takes time. And then there's the other role is where, hey, we just want to like get our stuff out as far, and people want an audit. So it's like the perception of security, and they just have a quick audit put together and put it on Twitter, and everybody, you know, most people, you know, don't really read through all of the details. Maybe some do, but they just say, oh, an audit was done, they must be safe. And, you know, that's one thing. Like I do understand, like it makes, you know, the security feel good for it. But I think that, you know, true auditing is all about finding those vulnerabilities and remediating them. And yeah, go ahead. Sir.
I was going to say, an audit at which point? Did you audit some kind of early release that you added one extra little line to, you know, save a little bit on gas by the time it actually posted on chain? Or have you upgraded that contract to include additional functionality after the audit? And how did that change things?
Yeah, one thing for sure that we see, and Will and I are working on this right now on, you know, doing an audit for economic type of attack is a whole different animal than doing like just an audit on the code that's kind of independent, you know, from the rest of the world, because there's so many conditions that you kind of have to do threat modeling for. You can't really predict like, oh, how much liquidity is going to be in this, you know, protocol here, and how many, how's the Oracle going to react here? There's a system and environment where you have to almost like do a risk-based analysis and provide methods to, in some way, to script and look at what are all the possible, you know, values that could occur on both extremes that could cause, something that either you didn't think of or cause a condition that can allow you to be vulnerable. So it's extremely complex, and the biggest challenge is getting a good environment to test in to do this dynamically. But there are some models to follow, and I think basically if you can identify at least high-level risks and protect them, that's a really good start and a good approach to do it as early as possible, you say.
I definitely see things going a bit more in that direction, because assessing those kind of things is something that requires like a very bespoke effort. And a lot of the stuff that you see in like a very, very baseline standard smart contract audits, that's something that could honestly, like, I was mentioning before in terms of setting different standards, that's something that could be taken care of mostly by just having like a hard standard that everyone follows. And that would save a lot of projects a lot of money, honestly. And then it would free up auditing firms to focus more on the areas where it's like you need someone thinking very critically about it, as opposed to just like reviewing like, does this fit, our personal firm standard for what we think is secure smart contract code. And I think it would provide a lot more just efficiency to the industry, because I mean, all you guys are swamped with projects trying to get audited, right? And I would imagine a lot of it is very, very similar types of stuff that you're trying to go through. And those types of economic attacks are definitely, they just require so much more setup. And, we've been working with Halborn on it as well. And it's just, a whole nother thing to do.
Yeah, you learn a lot along the way, but I think what we're doing, Will, is really, really a game changer as far as like new approaches to securing this stuff. One thing that I like, for the builders and developers out there for smart contracts is the more like test scripts that you have, and the more effort you put into like testing your own, maybe functional testing and unit testing on it. It makes it a great way to do security testing with that. Because a lot of the expected conditions that you have, or the scripts that you're running to interact with it, you're really just modifying those scripts to do some security hacks. So, this is I would say, hey, make some scripts for it so that you can get it tested better by auditors like us, like Will did. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I mean, every just real quick, like basically every line of code you make, like every hour you spend in development, you end up spending like an hour thinking about legal, an hour thinking about taxes, and like 4 hours thinking about security. And then you actually feel pretty good about those like lines of code.
I would say also that when you are thinking about security for the smart contracts, economic attacks are very unique and different. But don't forget about the more baseline things. You're still running your dApp on the DNS infrastructure. So there were multiple DNS attacks on Finance and PancakeSwap this year, where they took over the dApp and obviously modified the smart contracts, and we're trying to steal money that way. Think about how you protect your keys. You have governance systems. Can the governance systems be manipulated? Can your chief developer, who has a single private key that controls everything, how are those protected? So you can focus on the flash loans and really crazy attacks and cover those bases, but just get hacked by some more foundational things.
SIM swaps.
SIM swaps.
SIM swaps. Always watch out for SIM swaps.
So I know that we're really running close on time here, so I'll limit us with this final thought and final question, which is about the future. And what we'll do is just sort of like near-term future, just even like 12 months from now. My own personal opinion is that now we have a ton of liquidity, not only on Ethereum, but you have it now just launching on Algorand. You have tons of liquidity on Solana. You now have tons of liquidity on Binance Smart Chain, not to mention all of the layer 2 solutions launching like Polygon and probably like a dozen more, I believe, over the next several months. What security issues would you kind of imagine seeing if you had a time machine? You go in 12 months from now, what are we seeing in 12 months from now in this DeFi ecosystem with this increased complexity of more and more layer 1s coming into the space?
12 months from now, my doomsday perception would be some kind of systematic flaw that kind of cascades, where you have people forking one contract that relies on this one, and you have like now you have this like layered approach where like one collapses and causes all the other ones. So kind of like anti-decentralized, but that would be the worst case condition. Best case condition is we finally do get a standard out there that everybody's following, and now security has been really honed in on the essentials, and everybody's kind of like marching and understanding best practices.
I guess the prediction for 12 months from now is more and more of these chains come online and more of these projects. Like if we observe what's happening today, like BSC chain is becoming more popular. The majority of projects which are getting attacked on that chain are copies of Uniswap, of existing projects on the Ethereum network. So if the similar thing is going to happen on all of these newer chains where there's like a variation on gas fees or transactions are faster and so on, and people are jumping in to just quickly replicate existing projects, then we're probably going to see a lot more hacks. So my prediction is a lot of the same. We're at $500 million lost in DeFi hacks today. So I think it's safe to say in 12 months it's going to be at $1 billion. So
yeah.
Also, when things were really heating up on Ethereum, a lot of people were getting completely priced out of stuff. So you really only had the more like capitalized, savvier people actually doing things. And when you have a lot of these chains where the transaction fees are much cheaper, and even though gas fees have been pretty low recently on Ethereum, it's still a few bucks, right, to do stuff. It opens the doors for people that are much less educated in DeFi, and they're just trying to jump on whatever they think, they hear like, oh, this is good, and they just jump in, right? And I think when you have such low friction, I mean, that's great for the industry in general, but it also means that there's kind of less due diligence being done before people do jump in.
Whoever's on the top 5 on CoinMarketCap, let's invest in it right away.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time. So I just wanted to thank everyone for being able to come together here. Will from APY.Finance, Peter over at blockthreat.substack, and of course, Steve and I over at halborn.com. Thanks so much. Thanks for Justin and the DeFi Summit team for putting this together, and thanks for everyone watching.
Thanks for hosting.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Have a good one.